As the top legislature passed a host of bills, work reports, and budget plans, the president gave a speech.
It is a noble duty and a great responsibility to serve as a president of the People's Republic of China.
President Xi Jinping, who begins his second term this week, did not go into detail about his plan for the next 5 years. Instead, he spent much of his speech concentrating on China's past.
China has always been a nation with dreams, a moderately prosperous society and a shared future for mankind, a part of what the Chinese nation has been fighting for and dreaming about for thousands of years.
Following centuries of prosperity, the First Opium War between the UK and Qing dynasty in the mid-19th century was a turning point for the country, and it took China more than 100 years to recover.
Today, more than ever, the Chinese people are closer to realizing the dream of national rejuvenation.
Over the past 40 years, China has risen from a poor, industrialized nation to become the world's second-largest economy. Chinese politicians believe the success is largely based on the country's political system and its determination to reform it for practical reasons. This year's NPC has approved a series of significant legislation to continue the system's development. Last week, the NPC passed a series of amendments to China's constitution, which includes articles to ensure a continuity in leadership and a more independent supervisory commission to fight corruption.
We must always be people-oriented. We must let the people be the masters of the nation. We must learn from our people, listen to their voices, and act on their wisdom. What the people advocate, what the people approve and accept must be the sole measurement of all of our work.
Xi Jinping also came down hard on the concept of territorial integrity, following U.S. President Donald Trump's signing of the Taiwan travel bill over the weekend.
Any action that aims to separate the country is due to fail, and it will be condemned by the people and punished by the history.
Xi Jinping pledged that China would never seek hegemony nor expansionism, saying that only those who regularly threaten other countries would perceive other countries as a threat. Strong confidence but tough work ahead as the clock ticks towards the deadline from the ambitious 2020 goals. This government has essentially 3 more years to eradicate poverty, provide nationwide internet access, and create a moderately prosperous society for all. Han Peng, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, let's get you more on this NPC session. I'm joined live from Beijing by CGTN's Jane Keogh. Jane, it's been a long political season for China. Now that it's all over, do the NPC members feel a sense of accomplishment?
Well, they certainly do, Karen. This has by far been one of the longest 2 sessions, largely because it came immediately after the party congress, plus it was an election year, and so there were a number of issues on the agenda for the nearly 3,000 delegates, including the election of new leadership, the constitutional amendments, 21 amendments in total, and also perhaps one of the major highlights during these 2 sessions has to be the passing of the supervision law that has established the National Supervisory Commission, the reshuffling or the reshuffle of the ministries, which of course is in keeping up with China's fast-paced development process. And let's not forget that the deputies also had to just go through to discuss, deliberate and review the government work reports that are basically meant to set the agenda for the year and the coming years. Karen?
Well, you mentioned some of the highlights there. What decisions were made at the 2 sessions this year that will shape China going forward?
Well, Karen, one has to be the constitutional amendments, which, among others, removed the presidential term limits, but also established the now powerful anti-corruption agency, the National Supervisory Commission, that will expand and intensify the war on corruption to include employees of state-backed institutions who are not necessarily party members, unlike before. And this kind of shows the government's commitment in rooting out corruption, which is all part of the ongoing reforms. Another key element has to be the ministries, the restructuring of the government ministries in trying to streamline government operations, all this to enable or to provide better services to the people and more efficiency. And of course, Karen, we cannot talk about the success of these policies and initiatives without talking about the people behind this team. And that's why we have to talk about the new leadership, the re-election of President Xi Jinping, the removal of the presidential term limits. And the NPC deputies have made it clear that they trust Xi Jinping is the man that will move the country forward. They've told us they believe that continuity and stability will enable stability given the achievements over the last 5 years. And Karen, another key element moving forward has to be the election of Wang Qishan as the country's new vice president. He's one of President Xi Jinping's most trusted ally. He's an important political advisor. He comes in at a time when there are regional issues, when there are tense relations with the United States. He's expected to play a key role, especially in light of the ongoing talks about a trade war. And also, and so this is the man who actually took part, and he was in the forefront in stamping out and rooting out corruption, which has so far seen the punishment of at least 1.5 million people. Karen?
And Jane, what about the main decisions that may affect Africa? What should we be looking for?
Well, Africa should expect deeper relations. At least that is the message from Beijing, that Africa is very much on its agenda. This September, Beijing will be hosting the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit for the very first time in 12 years. Of course, this is a meeting that seeks to dialogue in a number of key areas, including agriculture, media, infrastructure with Africa, which China considers to be a key partner. But Beijing has also made clear that it wants Africa to be very much involved in BOR. That's the Belt and Road Initiative. And Foreign Minister Wang Yi said this during last week's press conference, that the Belt and Road Initiative will be high on the agenda during the FOCAC summit. And President Xi Jinping also made a mention of this, saying that increased connectivity under the BOR will be China's global role. He also said that China will be willing to help unselfishly, or will actually provide unselfish help to developing countries, war-torn nations, and countries that are suffering from poverty and hunger, which of course will include Africa. Karen?
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jane. That was CGTN's Jane Keogh there reporting on the end of this year's NPC session.